أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
As Brother Awan mentioned after Maghrib, we are full of gratitude this evening for WICS administration for allowing us from Al-Hamra Academy to present about our inaugural high school that just launched this past fall. Most of you know Al-Hamra Academy is based in Shrewsbury. We are the longest operating school Islamic school in New England, dating back to 1994. But just this past fall, alhamdulillah, we launched our high school initiative with our first class of 9th graders, the class of 2029, inshallah. We had 11 students who started with us this past August. And throughout the next 45 minutes or so, we want to walk you through our vision for why this high school is happening. And as some of you know, in Massachusetts, there's only one other full-time Islamic high school in our state. And what we're trying to do, what you'll learn over the next few minutes, is that Al-Hamra is not simply trying to do what every other high school does and stamp the Islamic name on top of it. We're not just offering the same type of courses that you would get at Shrewsbury or Worcester or Westboro high schools and offer religion and Quran on the side. We're trying to do something quite different, and in a good way, of course. We believe that the current model of high school education in this country is broken, and it's not doing an adequate job of preparing students not only academically but socially, emotionally, from a whole child perspective on being successful for the future, setting them up for success. You all are probably aware, and you've been reading a lot, maybe not as much as I have, about the dangers of AI and how it's going to replace all of us someday. And we can't do anything about that. But what we can do is lean into what our religion instructs us, what our religion holds esteemed very highly, the values that our religion teaches us to. And by doing so, by leaning into those values, we believe we can create whole individuals that can survive and get through any type of fitna, any type of difficulties, tribulations that this world throws at us. And so you'll hear about how our curriculum, why it matters, how it does this, but there's no way in these next 45 minutes we'll be able to cover every detail about what our innovative curriculum is doing. So we encourage you afterwards to ask questions. If we don't get a time to address all of your questions, please come to us individually afterwards and we're happy to address them. We are actively recruiting right now students, not only students who would be 9th graders this upcoming fall, but also students who would be 10th graders. And we also make cases, special cases for students who are in 11th grade and potentially even 12th grade. You'll hear all about how we ensure that our high school is accredited, how our courses are transferable, how they will still be interpretable through colleges. All of that's covered, inshallah. But I would request that you save your questions for the end. We're going to start with, to my furthermost right, Dr. Noor Ali. She'll be giving our first presentation, Navigating Identity in Educational Settings. Dr. Noor Ali, many of you know her. She was formerly the principal of Al-Hamra Academy. She's been an educator for 2 decades. She currently is an associate professor at Northeastern University, where she focuses her research broadly on the experiences of Muslims in our educational systems. And she's written 2 books on the topic. She's published in numerous peer-reviewed journals. She has written a book on poetry as well. And she also presents nationally at conferences regarding these topics around Muslims in educational settings. So there are very few people who are as qualified as her to talk about this subject, so we're very honored to have her here today and be a part of our high school initiative. So without further ado, Dr. Noor.
Thank you, Nouman. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to move us right along into the presentation because I know everyone wants dinner and then Isha, inshallah. So a lot of my work has, most of my work has been centered around Muslim youth and them navigating identity in educational settings. I started doing this particular work about, I'd say 12 years ago. As part of my doctoral research, and then it has been an ongoing project for me, obviously because of my own positionality and because of the community that we're in. And most importantly, because these were the students that I was working with. As Roman mentioned, I've been in education for 20 years, and what really started the journey of wanting to understand the experiences of Muslim Americans was this question that I used to ask my 8th graders a long time back. I would ask them this question. I would say, how do you feel about 9/11? And all of them born after 9/11, 98% of the students that I asked this question said they felt guilty about it. And this was deeply problematic because our youth are born into this world carrying the burden of anti-Muslim bias right there. So that was kind of like the starting point for me where I began this research, and I'll walk you through a little bit of that today, just a very, very little bit of that today. So as we're all aware what the term Islamophobia means, I like to use the word anti-Muslim bias because I find the term Islamophobia to be problematic. But if we were speaking purely in definitions, we would say it's the fear, prejudice, hatred, or discrimination against Muslims or people who are perceived as Muslims, right? If you are thought to be Muslim, you will also have the experience of Islamophobia. And we know that there is a very large historical context around the racialization of religion. What does this mean? This essentially means that we know about the history and the presence of racism in the United States. It's obvious to all of us. And a lot of us, when we're thinking about racism, are thinking about it in terms of the black-white binary. Or we're thinking about racism when it relates to race. Islam is not a race. However, there is an experience of oppression that takes place with people that are identifiable as Muslim. So when religion is racialized, the experience of racism or oppression becomes very similar in its enactment upon these people. And that's essentially what we see in our case. A lot of my research is centered around understanding the experience. So what I did was I created a theoretical framework to understand this larger experience. I don't want to turn this into a lecture, but I'll tell you two important tenets from Muskrat. One important tenet is identifiability, which is as soon as you are identifiable as Muslim, that is when the experience of anti-Muslim bias kicks in. If you are not identifiable as Muslim, you can evade that experience. And this may seem fairly obvious to a lot of us. However, identifiability is a very critical part of our faith. It is how we represent ourselves in the way we conduct or dress up or speak or fast in public, all of those different types of things, right? What does that mean? It means that you always have to be making a choice of whether you want to be identifiable or not. And if I'm speaking of this from the perspective of an adult, I can tell you a personal story. I was in the doctorate of education program. I had done 4 courses, and in every course I was asked to introduce myself. And I would introduce myself like this. I would say, hey, I'm Noor. I'm originally from Pakistan, and I work at a faith-based school in Shrewsbury. None of this is inaccurate. It's all accurate. But it took me 4 courses to realize the self-invalidation that was happening to me, who was 36 years old at the time. And I thought to myself, I said, I'm 36, and I'm unconsciously bringing in this self-invalidation process where I'm buffing the edges of my personality, of my character, of my identity to make myself acceptable to my colleagues who are in this doctoral program. I'm not saying I'm from Pakistan. I'm saying I'm originally from Pakistan. And that is a means of sanitizing and saying I'm safe. I'm not there anymore. I'm here. So it's okay to be around me. The other thing is I'm saying I'm coming from a faith-based school, not an Islamic school, because I'm seeking relevance, because there's not many other people from an Islamic school in a doctorate program. When I say I come from a faith-based school, I'm saying my experience might be common to a whole lot of other people. And then this came to the next question where I asked myself, I'm 36, I had 2 children at the time, I had 2 masters, and I said, this is how self-invalidation worked on a completely mature, educated adult. What about the 6-year-old? What about the 11-year-old? What about the 16-year-old? How are they navigating their identity and speaking about being identifiable or not? So that piece of this is really critical in this experience. CARE has done phenomenal work in the last 2 years in particular, where they have conducted extensive research on the experiences of high school students in the United States, Muslim high school students. The 2 states that they particularly looked at were California and Massachusetts. So we actually have very current data from the state of Massachusetts and what public school, high school students are saying about that experience. We know that in the state of Massachusetts, nearly 50% of Muslim students have reported experiencing harassment or discrimination on high school campuses. The incidents have spiked dramatically after October 7th, as we all know, and 92% of students after October 7 have reported some sort of a bias experience that has taken place in front of them or with them. In Massachusetts K-12 schools, 48% of the Muslim students reported being bullied for their religion. 35% of the female students that were studied in this reported that, and who wore hijab, reported that they had experienced physical harassment. There were even cases of students' hijabs being pulled off within the school setting from students, and get this, also from teachers. This is all reported data. 37% of the students had witnessed their peers being bullied for being Muslim. And 35%, which I personally thought was the most startling of the statistic, was that 35% of the Muslim students said that they had experienced offensive comments made by teachers. Whether this is in the term of microaggressions or really explicit, overt commentary that is done, this is all documented. And I know in my own experience, I'll have, long after students have graduated, people will come back, parents will come back, and they'll be like, hey, my child had this experience, what should we do? So I know that this is not, there's a lot of qualitative as well as quantitative data around this. These are a couple of statements, I don't want to read all of them, but these are a couple of statements that students shared in that CARE report that just came out. One of them said, people literally insult me while I'm praying. Our school has massive Islamophobia. Everyone in the Muslim Student Association has experienced it. One of the students who was going to the school as a niqabi said, this is hard, no one wants to be in the same group with me. The school administrator literally did nothing to support me or my family. This is one quote from the CARE report, but I know in my experience of interviewing a whole bunch of people over this last decade, I repeatedly am seeing this refrain of lack of administrative support when it comes to their experiences of discrimination and oppression. So how does this all tie to my research? One of the things that I spoke about earlier was identity. And when I speak about identity, I do want to speak about, I've already talked about identifiability, but I want to speak a little bit about double consciousness. This is a really important concept. And we have, there's a ton of literature on double consciousness when it comes to the Black experience in the United States. But you can actually have the same application of it to the Muslim experience. So what is double consciousness? Double consciousness is basically living every day of your life, living your life, playing out 2 consciousnesses at the same time. So for example, you are always living, thinking about how you identify to yourself, but simultaneously you're also living as to how you're being perceived as being identified. And the perception that Muslims have is one of the other. So the way our youth conduct themselves in the larger world, in their communities, is not just comfortably going around being Muslim. They're also going around worried about how they are being perceived as being Muslim. And that's a really critical stage for youth to be in. whether it's elementary school students or middle school students or high school students, to constantly be navigating this double consciousness is a huge undertaking. It is a huge burden that our youth, are responsible for. In many ways, our youth also find themselves responsible for representing the entire faith. Like all of Islam rests on their shoulders, right? And we use that commentary quite often with them also. What this also then represents itself in is our students are always, this was the most recent research project that I'm in, which is ongoing, is as Muslims, we're always navigating silencing and speaking up, right? We're filtering. All of us who work in professional spaces that are outside of our affinity are constantly navigating when do we remain silent and when do we speak up? When do we identify as Muslims and when do we don't? And that becomes also an additional burden, whether it's conversations that are taking place. In my research, I've seen this happen over and over again, where they're like, 9/11 is always talked about in school, and every time it happens, people look at me like, and what do you think? Or what do you have to say? Or how can you offer an apology for what happened, right, for this? The third thing I want to talk about is acculturation. Acculturation is a really important concept that we see in, in communities that are marginalized and in communities that are navigating a mainstream culture, as well as, you could say, a culture of origin or their own culture, whatever term you want to use for it. And there's 4 different stages that we see in it. One of the stages that you see of acculturation is when an individual will completely want to assimilate and absorb the mainstream culture and do away with their own religious or ethnic culture, okay? So I'm being given the time, I get it. So that's one thing where they're totally trying to assimilate. The other thing that can happen is when they are holding strongly to their own identity and dismissing everything that belongs to the mainstream culture, right? A third thing that can happen is the individual is trying to balance the mainstream culture as well as their own culture, which we may see or may want to see. A fourth thing, which is the highest form of marginalization, is when the individual feels they do not belong to the mainstream culture and not to their own either. And this is a classic case that we see with our youth, where our youth are never going to be considered American enough. If they are identifiable as Muslim, they will never be considered American enough because of their identity. But unfortunately, and this is the double whammy, they're also not considered Muslim enough by our own community. So they're facing a double marginalization from both angles, and that is a deeply problematic situation for them to be in. So, and this, ends up relating to hyphenated identities where there's external pressure to choose one or the other. There's different cultural expectations that the mainstream has, as well as what their own home might have. Because I have been shown the time, I won't go over my impact slide, but you can see that the impact of all of this is immense, whether it's on their academic performance, on social interactions, and also on their mental health. And there is a lot of data to support this side of it as well. In my work, I've come across lots of student interviews and expressions that they've shared with me. I'm afraid of people's perception of what Islam is and who Muslims are, because I don't want to ever be afraid of being who I am. Other individuals said something like, nobody is checking up on me. Everybody knows that I'm a Muslim person, but nobody's asking, is everything all right? This was post October 7. So what does Alhambra offer at this point, you might say? The vision for Alhambra High School is one that is very intentional and is really centered on all of this data that we have before us. We all have our lived experiences to share of what it is like being Muslim in America, but we also know what the research is showing us. So 3 things that we were really intentional about in our planning was academics, and we made sure, and I'll take us to the next slide over there, every single course that the high school students are going through, which we now have 9th and 10th graders with us. So next year, inshallah, with the enrollment, it's looking like 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. Every single course that is taught at Alhambra is a signature course, meaning it is not coming out of a boxed curriculum that was made for a not Muslim audience. Every single course is a signature course. All the faculty are experts in their field that we're bringing to the table. And we're really intentional about what is the larger vision that Adnan will talk about in just a bit. What is the philosophical vision behind education that is holistic in nature? Our students are also asked to do 100 impact hours before their graduation, whether this is of community service or leadership or a mix of that. And then the student experience also includes all of the other after-school activities that they're doing. They're all involved in a passion project. There's the robotics team, speech and debate, lots of athletics. I want to give you a little brief look into some of the signature courses. As you can see over here, we have Quran and classical Arabic that Hafiz Usman will speak about in just a bit. But take a look at the religion courses. The courses we did this year, all that you're seeing on the screen is year one. They've all done this or are just wrapping up this in year one. They had Intro to Spiritual Development, Foundations of Sacred Sciences. Both of these courses were taught by Dr. Numan Kanani on that side. We had Interpreting the Quran with Dr. Jean Erdali. And then over to the STEM side, we had Architectural Physics. Now, this is an interdisciplinary model, and what that means is you're not teaching them a singular physics course like you would in a typical high school. You're teaching physics with application in mind, right? So in the architectural physics course, we focused entirely on architectural design and how the principles of physics apply to that. And then their final project there was to design the prototype of a refugee shelter in Gaza, for which they had to do research on what are the materials that are available to them, and how can they make it most effective, applying the principles of physics. They just finished a course called Sports in Motion, which is the second physics course. In this, they designed sports equipment for Paralympians, that have a really hard time swimming. Every single course that you're seeing here is tied to a larger vision. If you take a look at the specials, you've probably never seen specials like this. Intro to Entrepreneurship, Media Literacy and Social Narratives, Financial Literacy and Economic Justice, Health Literacy and Community Advocacy. Every single course is taking it a step ahead and beyond, maybe more than a step ahead and beyond, because there's such a lot of critical thinking that is involved in their work. I'm incredibly proud of the work that our students are doing and of our faculty, and we're definitely here to take any questions or anything like that. Thank you.
So before we go to our next panelist, I want to ask one question to Dr. Noor that might be on some of your minds. So to borrow from the language of those on the center and center right, some might argue that, are we not coddling the minds of our students? Don't they eventually have to be in spaces where they will be the other? And if they don't learn how to do that in high school, when will they learn, and will we be putting them further behind when they eventually go to college?
Thank you. This is literally the question that this is the most frequently asked question, and the answer is no. There is actually no evidence that this is true, and this is simply a perception of our mind that that is the case. Here's my favorite sentence from my own work. Our students need places to be and become themselves, not to explain themselves. Do not think that your children need to have an experience where they constantly have to explain themselves to make them better Muslims. Give them places where you can cultivate their identity, where they can be proud of who they are, where they can really truly be and become themselves, where they can understand things. Where else are they going to understand what spiritual development is or what foundations of sacred sciences are? There's so many adults that have reached out to me and said, can we take a course? Because we all see the lack of this in our own learning experiences as we went through educational systems here or elsewhere, right? The other thing is we should never think that this education is a compromise on an academic experience. What we are experiencing right now, and there is plenty of literature on the United States education system, that is a huge compromise because of the lack of critical thinking, because of the lack of problem solving and inquiry. because of the control on the curriculum, what can and cannot be taught. We know all about the literature bans that have taken over this country. So there is absolutely nothing to lose. High school student, a high school age student really needs the space, the academic space, to be able to cultivate a strong identity for themselves. Nobody's stopping anyone from going into the world. They're going into the world in college, right? And it is best if they are prepared for that instead of putting them in that situation when they are just high schoolers, and we all know what those hormones are like.
Jazakumullahu khairan. So now I'm going to turn the microphone over to Dr. Adnan Rahman. He's going to kill me for this, but also known as Noor's husband. Dr. Adnan was formerly an engineer in the 1990s. Then he had a change of heart. And after 1 year or so in the field, I think after you paid off your student loans or something like that, he went abroad to Pakistan and he became a student of the late Dr. Asar Ahmed. He studied Islamic traditionally for several years. After that, followed by that, multiple graduate degrees in Islamic studies, in philosophy, eventually a PhD in philosophy from Boston University. Nowadays, he teaches, he's an adjunct at multiple colleges in the area, including Holy Cross, Springfield, at the Boston Islamic Seminary, and has been teaching our history courses at Al-Hamra High School for the last school year. He's also the brains behind a lot of what our history curriculum and our Islamic studies curriculum is all about. So without further ado, Dr. Adnan, who's going to walk us through more of the how.
الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن الحكيم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه صدق الله وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه آمين يا رب العالمين. So you heard my introduction. As we were walking into the masjid today, I was asking my wife, how is it that I got involved in this project? This was not supposed to be my project, but somehow I got pulled into it, and now I cannot let go because I've seen the results of my own teaching and what we're trying to do. What you just heard from Noor was what I would say our present condition, the world as it exists today. That present condition is related to both our past and, of course, it's related to our future. What you heard was our present experience as a very small diaspora community in the United States. How is it in 21st century we ended up here? Most of us were, as I look at the elders, not born here. Why are we here? Think about where you came from. Are there any white people who are living in parts of the world where we came from, trying to earn their living over there? Why not? Why are we here and they don't go where we came from? It's because our civilization has been disrupted, mainly by them. That disruption is part of the reason why we're here. So our minority concerns here are related to a larger picture. Islamophobia is not just an American problem. After 9/11, it became a global problem for global Muslim community, for the Ummah. When something happens way over there, we get in trouble over here. So our situation is connected with what happens in the rest of the Ummah. And so the vision that we're trying to develop at Al-Hamra is situated in a very large context. And that is part of the novelty that we are offering at Alhambra. So look at the title. Competent Leaders, Civilizational Purpose, the Alhambra High School Model. What I'm supposed to be talking about is what is this vision of Alhambra and what is the curriculum like. But in order for you to fully understand and appreciate what we are offering, I need to frame this in a larger context. So here's that larger context. First of all, what is a civilization? We, in the Muslim world, are blessed to have a religion that has come to us that we are custodians of from our past. Islam has given us historically two things. It has given us a deen, and it has given us a civilization. As far as the deen is concerned, it is complete. Beyond that, it is perfected. Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-islam deena. If the ayah has said al-yawma atmamtu lakum dinakum, that would imply there was a series that was ongoing and suddenly it came to an end. Just like you have links in a chain, no one link in the chain is better than the other. And at some point the chain comes to an end. But when you say akmaltu lakum, akmaltu is ikmal. It is perfection. Nothing more can be added after ikmal. So ad-deen is perfected in its form as given to Muhammad Rasulullah. After his departure, nothing can be added. If you add to the deen, you imperfect it. If you take away from it, you imperfect it. Deen is complete. And we should be very, very grateful that we, the Muslim civilization, has performed a miracle. Despite all of our disruptions, despite all of our decline, we have been able to preserve ad-deen in its entirety. We have our Quran, we have the Sunnah preserved, and what we did last month, even if we did not have a single word written down, the fact that Sunnah has come down to us, our text has come down to us by an unbroken chain of textual transmission. But our deen has also come down to us by an unbroken chain of practice. Okay? That is the magic of Sunnah. That is preserved. But after the Prophet, historically we have also created a civilization. And that civilization is what we have forgotten about. What is a civilization? This is the masjid. When was the last time you heard a khutbah about civilization? Or politics? Or architecture? Or Islamic history? Or Islamic science? Okay. That's the part that we have forgotten. It's been forgotten because it's been disrupted. So what is a civilization? Civilization is a complex. It has everything you can imagine under the sun. I'm only going to highlight some elements of civilization that are important in relation to education. Knowledge, values, morals. Beyond that, intellectual tradition. Every civilization creates its sciences. Every civilization has STEM subject. Every civilization has technology. Every civilization creates infrastructure. It has architecture. It has arts. It creates skills. It creates infrastructures. The Great Wall of China, the pyramids. No civilization can be without these things. This is material culture. Okay. Now, for about 1,300 years or so, our civilization continued on. It had all kinds of internal problems, as any civilization does. There were ruptures here and there. But we have never suffered discontinuity of the totality. Then what happened? What happened was the event of colonization. Colonization, we usually think of it as a political project, which it was. We think of it as a military project, which it was. We think of it as an economic project, which it was, but it was far more greater than that. It was a civilizational project. And as a civilizational project, it disrupted our civilizational continuity. And so out of that disruption came fragmentation of the Ummah's unity. Out of that disruption came disintegration of our institutional coherence. We used to have multiple institutions that worked together. It doesn't mean that they were perfect, that they had to, you don't have to have perfect institutions, but as long as your civilization is intact, all the institutions work together. Okay? That was disrupted. And then, as a result, we lost civilizational integrity. Okay? There was a time when someone like Ibn Battuta could travel from the Middle East all the way down to Southeast Asia, Java, Sumatra, Indonesia. No passport. Wherever he went, he was a citizen. Today, when you look at the map, there are borders. And some countries will not allow you, even if you're Muslim, even if they're Muslim. Okay? So that is one manifestation of that disruption, that fragmentation, that disintegration. Okay? Out of that comes another problem, a proliferation of incompetent leaders, incompetent leadership. It wasn't very long ago that all of our leaders were lined up in Tel Aviv trying to normalize with our cousins. Luckily, that has come to an end. But lack of competent leaders, we all recognize is a big problem. Question is, this is our condition now. That was our past then. We need to move to a future where we can change our situation from one of violence and disintegration to one of unity, solidarity, peace, prosperity, dignity, respect, and progress. And that requires that we figure out how to connect the past with the future. And education plays an extremely important role, especially for us, given that we are such a small diaspora community here in the United States. So education for us here in the United States is a means to recover and restore the civilizational disruption that we have experienced. Without that disruption, we would not be sitting here. They would be sitting there. We are here because of that disruption. Okay? Moving forward. Problem of the modern Western, we came here primarily, at least this is what my elders told us, to get education and then to have stable jobs, stable finances. That we accomplished. Now we have a problem in that we are living the third and fourth generation of Muslims in America, and that system of education we have now learned is no longer serving us. It's in part not serving us because the model education in the West it comes out of a liberal Western secular imagination. And liberalism is all about individualism. If you want to understand what is the heart of liberalism, it is individualism. That is, it takes the individual human being as the ultimate and the final source and arbiter of values, of principles, of morals, of ethics. Okay. In our case, who is the ultimate source and arbiter of morals and values and principles? That source is not even in this world. It comes from above. That's the final and ultimate arbiter. But in liberalism, it's the individual. Individual gets to decide. And as long as individual is not disrupting you and me, whatever. If you want to cut off your organ, perfectly fine. Because you get to decide how to make and remake yourself. And then this liberal education, this liberal civilization, at some point early on during the Industrial Revolution, tied education to careerism. In the modern system, we go to school to get careers so we can ensure good, stable paychecks. That's it. Beyond that, yes, if you read Massachusetts standards, you will find there's a lot of talk of democracy, democracy, democracy. And yet, I've been to that education, to this system, many of you have been to that system. The links that the civics makes with the rest of your life is very minimal. I teach mainly white students. They hardly know their history, and they hardly know their religion. Their high schools has not prepared them. Okay? They are not rooted in their own civilization. Okay? What we have to do is to reverse the process on our end. And then also the Western education overemphasizes STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, math. Okay? My first degree was in engineering, computer engineering, robotics. We were forced to take humanities subjects, but there was never any link as to what I'm doing in philosophy, what does that have to do with religion or with psychology or with the rest of American history. Okay? So there's a deep disconnect there between STEM subjects and humanities. Now at college level, all education is divided into these two subjects. STEM, science, engineering, technology, math, science, technology, engineering, math, and humanities. There's no religion involved. And what has happened is that STEM subjects get to trump humanities. Humanities are about the human condition, spirituality, ethics, morals, psychology, anthropology, literature, architecture. Okay? What should happen is this, that humanities should have authority over STEM subjects. The philosopher and the ethicist and the priest who should tell the engineer what he should make. But what we're having, especially now with AI, it's the tech people who are now driving the civilization. Okay? There's no concern with morals or the human condition or the environment or humanity at large. They can go to hell, it doesn't matter. As long as we're making our money and the guy gets to be the first trillionaire in the world, that's all that matters. Okay? So in the West, they have to switch this authority. Humanities should have authority over STEM subjects. That's what we're doing at Alhambra. At Alhambra, STEM subjects don't have authority. Humanities have authority. But we are also Muslim. So in our case, what we're going to do is we have a third layer. In our case, Islamic studies and our spirituality and morality and ethics and theology get to have authority over the humanities. You see, this is deliberate. Because if we want to recover that civilizational integrity, then what should be the driving factor of education and the vision of our leaders? It should be La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And so we are very deliberately creating a curriculum in which humanities have authority over STEM and Islamic studies gets to have authority over humanities, which means the way we read literature, the way we read history, the way we read the sciences, and the way we interpret them is determined by our spiritual tradition. Okay? And we actually teach students how to do this. Okay? This cannot be replicated in any other public high school. That's not possible. Okay? Now let me give you some quick, I'll give you examples. But the Alhambra High School model has these 5 important elements to it. One is what is called today holism. The other is interdisciplinarity. Third is competencies. 4 is experiential learning and project-based learning. And these are all interlinked. What is holism? This is something the liberals and the progressives have discovered very recently. They have discovered, are you ready for this? That human beings are complex creatures. That we are not just brains that require science, technology, and engineering, math, but we are also hearts and emotions and psyche. We have a mind, and that we live in societies, that we live in families, that we live in cultures. So therefore, education should be about teaching the whole person. Okay? If you read the literature, you would think, we have discovered some awesome new reality about education. This is how most humanity has, in fact, done education throughout most human history until we got to the modern West. Look at the Hindu civilization. They understand you're a whole person. Look at the Buddhist civilization. They understand you're a whole person. They will teach you psychology and spirituality and ethics and morals and the rest. Okay? And so we Muslims know how to do this. We know that we are a whole person. We know we have to teach the spiritual heart and the emotional heart and the intellectual mind and the acting body. We understand that. Okay? And so we are trying to hit all of those points, all of those faculties of human experience at Alhambra. We're not just teaching brains, science and engineering, technology and math. We are doing that. But we are also teaching how to discipline your emotions. That's what Tazkiyah is all about. We are also teaching how to live in a society, how to contribute to your community, to your society, to your country, and to humanity at large, and of course to your ummah. Okay? Interdisciplinarity has to do with how do you connect these three. Okay? So the way usually this works is, if you have a Muslim school, you will do science, technology, engineering, math. Then you do some literature, history. There's never any connection. What does history have to do with physics? It must have something to do with physics if it is, if it involves the instruction and the application of the total human being. Your brain should have something to do with your heart, right? Usually the STEM subjects are brain subjects, and humanities are subjects of the heart, of feelings, of emotions, of sentiments. There should be a connection. You're never told that connection, okay? And then for us, what does the Quran have to do with history and psychology and architecture and philosophy and the rest of it, okay? So what was I saying before? Yeah, so interdisciplinarity is trying to make those connections explicit, okay? And I'll give you an example in a bit. Okay. In fact, let me give you an example now. So when I teach history, I begin by teaching Islamic historiography. What is that? Most of you would not be able to answer. What are the basic principles of historical interpretation in the Quran? Your khatibs cannot tell you this. Your imams. Madrasa graduates cannot tell you this. They don't study this stuff. To do that, you'd have to at least study Ibn Khaldun and master it. But madrasas don't teach Ibn Khaldun. You should study Al-Farabi. They don't teach Al-Farabi in the madrasas, right? So our own system has forgotten part of our own history, our own tradition, okay? So when I teach Islamic historiography, first thing that my students know and will be able to tell you that the world, khalq, creation, is a result of Allah's divine names. There's rahmah in the world because Allah has distributed some of His rahmah in the world. We have a hadith. Allah divided His rahmah in 100 parts. One part gave to creation, 99 parts He kept for Himself. Okay? And so the fact that we are Sami and Basir is because Allah is As-Sami, Al-Basir, so on and so forth. So khalq, all of it, creation, the universe, cosmos, is a result of some manifestations of Allah's names. My students know this. Number two, creation has two elements to it. There's the structure, cosmology, khalq as-samawati wal ard. And then there are principles or laws on which the universe functions. That is sunnatullah. And the Quran says, وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَحْوِيلًا. Allah's sunnah, His laws do not change. Whether it's history, whether it's gravity, whether it's the table of elements, His sunnah that He has established, which is absolute, doesn't change. The value of pi, doesn't matter what happens in the universe, is gonna be the ratio of 22 to 7. 3.1426 da da da. The Max Planck's constant is never going to change. The Pythagorean theorem is absolute. Those are laws of Allah, laws of thermodynamics and laws of physics, laws of motion. All of these are part of Sunnatullah. Part of Sunnatullah is the human fitrah. فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليها لا تبديل لخلق الله. Okay. Now, how do we get history? History is the attempt of human beings trying to actualize their fitrah or the potentials in their fitrah. The Prophet said, every child is born with recognition, potential recognition of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Kullu mawlud yuladu ala al-fitrah. فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ أو يُنَصِّرَانِهِ يُمَجِّسَانِهِ. The potential to be Muslim is there, but the environment changes you. Therefore, fitrah is a potential. How do you get human history? You get it by human beings living in certain environment and trying to actualize that fitrah. That's how you get human history. And therefore, laws of sunnatullah and laws of human fitrah are to be found in every historical situation. You can study the Chinese, you can study the Aztecs, we've done that. You can study the Mongols, we've done that. You can study the Hindus, we've done that. You will find that same laws of fitrah and same sunnatullah is to be abstracted in those, to be found in those, from every particular instance of history. My students know this. Now find me a high school in the United States or even in the Muslim world that teaches you Islamic historiography this way. This is the promise of proper Islamic education. This is how we get to recover, we start recovering our civilizational integrity that we have lost. This semester, starting Monday, I'm also teaching a new course. It's called Make America Think Again. It's a course on critical thinking and logic. Okay? And what am I going to cover? I'm going to cover analogical reasoning. I'm going to cover 3 laws of reasoning, 3 fundamental laws. I'm going to cover deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, abductive reasoning, and logical fallacies. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. We will look at science, we will look at literature, but we will also look at the Quran. You will be amazed how different the Quran is when it comes to applying different kinds of reasoning. Okay? And so here's an example. إن مثل عيسى عند الله كمثل آدم خلقه من تراب ثم قال له كن فيكون. The mithal of Allah, of Isa, the example of Isa, is like the example of Adam. Okay? This mathal here is saying that case is like that case. This case that you're confused about, understand that other case that you know of, the known, and then apply it to the unknown. This is called analogical reasoning. Earliest form of sophisticated reasoning that human beings developed in human history is analogical reasoning. You cannot understand polytheism, idolatry, paganism until and unless you understand analogical reasoning. And Quran is full of analogical reasoning. Number 2, here's another ayah. وَإِن كُنتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِّثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. This is inductive reasoning. Quran is saying, if you're confused about this Quran being from Allah, here's a test. Do an experiment. This is inductive reasoning. Test it for yourself. And then Quran says, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا فَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. We know what the result is going to be. This is deductive reasoning. When you already know the truth, the result is already known, that is called deductive reasoning. Okay? So we're going to look at logic by reading the Quran. Now imagine the kind of understanding your students will develop once they read the Quran this way. Okay? All right. The only other thing I'm going to mention is, oh yeah, very good. Okay? Very important aspect of our curriculum is competencies. A competency is a skill that you develop over time. Okay? So every course at Alhambra is supposed to address these competencies, these skills. Every course. Okay? Foundational knowledge, every course has to have some literacy, right? What are the basic principles of physics? What is the table of elements, so on and so forth. And then critical thinking and problem solving. I am teaching critical thinking and logic to sharpen this skill. So there's a course on it, but every course has to have some element of critical thinking. Effective communication. Research and knowledge application. That has to do with project-based learning and experiential learning. Collaborative and community engagement, a lot of group work. Creativity and innovation. Okay? And personal growth and reflection. So if you work in corporate America, and especially if you're in technology, your managers will tell you that engineering students, STEM students have serious trouble communicating. I've heard that again and again. Why? Because engineering doesn't teach you how to communicate well. And sometimes that is much more important than the technology that you do. And so that's, for example, this is why effective communication is part of our competency. In every course, these have to be addressed. So imagine there's a difference between taking one course on logic and every course, every semester for 4 years hitting reasoning, logic, critical thinking, reasoning, logic, critical thinking. That's development of skills. So our whole assessment framework is based on competencies. Okay? And this is really, we are very proud of this. Okay? And this is one of the unique aspects of what we're doing at Alhambra. I am at time, so again, any questions you have, we will be available. Thank you very much. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.
So one of the key takeaways from Dr. Adnan's talk just now is that we have a very rigorous curriculum. And it's very different. The names of the courses that you saw earlier that Dr. Noor showed, it's very much like what you would see at a college level. But even many of us, we teach at colleges, and we can tell you from our experience that we speak at, quote unquote, these elite colleges, Boston College, Holy Cross, Northeastern University, Boston University, and many of our own students, freshmen, sophomores, are struggling with a lot of these concepts. They go through high school not having even read a single book from front to end. They don't know how to build a logical argument. So as we build these skills for students over time, not only are they gaining very valuable skills that will inshallah last them a lifetime, but we also spoke to colleges directly about our curriculum, and we said, hey, we're doing something really different. On kids' resume, on their transcripts, you're not going to see English 101 or English 10th grade. You're going to see food for thought. You're going to see these different types of courses. But here's what they're learning. And they were all very excited about the prospect. This is what they actually want to see in more of their students. They're actually frustrated by what they see from most of the average public school students who come out and have a very cookie cutter type of resume. The fact that we're able to offer this different experience is something that they also perceive as valuable. Not that that should be our bar, but it is something that others, not just within our own community, see as very valuable. Our last speaker tonight is someone who you all know very well, Hafid Uthman. I'm not going to go through his introduction because you all know him very well. Let me just say one thing. Today he gave a khutbah about shukr. He quoted the verse from the Quran, that no matter, you can never count or quantify the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has been one of the most important blessings of our community. Or you also quoted the hadith that you cannot thank Allah unless you thank the people. He has been also an extremely essential member of our community. He has been serving you all for a while, but alhamdulillah, he's been able to offer some of his gracious time for teaching our students Quran. And beyond just teaching them Quran, he's just an incredible mentor to our students, someone who's just a very valuable friend to them, whose advice they very, very much value. And seeing him in action here in Al-Hamra has been such a pleasure to see. So without further ado, Dr. Hafid Uthman.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Inshallah, I'll make this very simple, inshallah. So think about a day where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask you as a parent in regards to the amana that He has given you in this dunya. Just think about that for a moment. Usually we tell our kids, go to middle school, go to high school, go to college, get a degree, make a lot of money, and then live your life. That has been like the philosophy. Like we usually tell our kids, go to college, make sure you get into a good program for good money, and then live your life. Without actually thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the whole entire process. It's about time that we have to change that framework. Whenever you have a son, or you have a daughter, you're going to high school, you're going to college, the ultimate goal for this ilm is for them to know Allah. That has to be the focus. If my son is going to be a medical doctor, how can he be a medical doctor and also know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If my daughter is going to be a doctor, engineer, a nurse, how can they combine both? Knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and also seeking the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them into this dunya. The second important thing that I would like to talk about is about the importance of guiding our kids. My respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inna hadha al-Qur'an yahdi lillati hiya aqwa. Indeed, this Qur'an, this book that we have, it guides you to what is upright, what is good. And as a Muslim, there's no way you're going to be able to differentiate what is wrong or what is right except knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the only way you're going to be able to know Allah is through the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. You cannot know Allah without the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is by reading, learning, memorizing, understanding. Through that process, whatever degree your son is going to have, whatever degree your daughter is going to have, they are aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another important thing I would like to highlight, It's about our definition of success. What is success to us as Muslims? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. The true successful one is the one that protects himself from Jahannam and then he makes it to Jannat al-Firdaus. That is the person that has indeed successful lived in this dunya for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now the question is this: how are we going to cultivate that habit into our kids, our high schoolers, our college, to understand that you could succeed both in this dunya and the akhirah? If you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this dunya, then you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But imagine you're in this dunya, you spend a lot of time, you go to college, you have a degree, but you have no knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you have not actually fulfilled the haqq. And the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you is for ibadah. We all know that. But how can we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge? And subhanallah, I got the chance to join Alhamdulillah High School this year. And subhanallah, every single day, when I walk into that building, and the first thing your son or your daughter is going to start their day with is the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. Every single day, they get Quran with me and Hafiz Ali. Monday through Friday. The first hour, Quran. That alone, my sacred brothers and sisters, softens the heart of your child. That alone. Just your kid coming to Quran class, starting their day with Quran, before they take philosophy, before they take English, before they take science, they are connecting themselves with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this Quran class, there's 4 main areas that we focus on. Number 1 is to develop a sense of connection with the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. We've realized that people graduate from high school and go to college and they don't read anymore, honestly. Either they are not connected or they don't read. One of the things that we've been trying to do is to cultivate the habit. Every single day you're going to read the Quran. And it's a habit that we want them to try to use that when they get to college. Knowing that regardless if I'm memorizing, I'm not memorizing, I need to make time and read the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We also have a weekly reflection. One of the things that we do is regardless if you're memorizing or you're reading, there's a weekly reflection that you have to present a weekly reflection. You have to write a weekly reflection in regards to what you have memorized or what you have read. Alhamdulillah, right now we've read from Surah Al-Baqarah all the way to Surah Yusuf. So we have 2 different tracks within the Quran program. We have track A. The students, they get Quran memorization every single day. And some of them have the intention to memorize the whole entire Quran in 4 years. So they are required to memorize a lot. 1 page, 1.5 page. And then we have track B. They get 2 days of Quran memorization and 2 days of reading. Alhamdulillah, we've read from Surah Al-Baqarah all the way to Surah Yusuf. The track B right now, we are currently in Juz 27. We've done Surah Al-Waqi'ah, Surah Al-Rahman, and we are currently finishing Surah Al-Qamar. For the track A student, alhamdulillah, we have 2 students that have memorized 6 ajza. Alhamdulillah, takbir. And then we have one brother, Hafiz Bilal, who was just here. He finished memorizing the Quran, and he's with us. So for him, if he's a Hafiz, what is he doing? He's reviewing the Quran. He has read from Baqarah all the way to Surah Al-Kahf from memory. You have to imagine a kid coming to Quran class, reviewing the Quran, and also getting the other sciences that he has to have. I'm not going to take that much of your time. So the last thing I'm going to mention is my respected brothers and sisters in Islam. I want you to imagine this. Every single day, there's an opportunity in this community for your son or your daughter to be able to read the Quran, memorize the Quran, and at the same time, get the other sciences that they have to take. I just want you to think about that for a minute. هذا وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير.
Jazakumullahu khairan. We have time for 2 quick questions if anyone wants to. Oh, 1 question. It's quick, maybe 2. Oh, we have one in the back.
Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My question is about a bullet that you had in one of your slides. It referenced a term that I am not familiar with, so I was hoping that you could enlighten me. I've heard of the term usulul fiqh because it's something that we've had an imam here in the past, Imam Asif Hirani. He actually taught that here, I believe. But I think you mentioned something different. It was usulul deen. Could you just shed some color, some light on what that is and how you teach it? And I actually have a second question. I'm going to throw it in there because I know we're short on time, and you can answer very briefly. In the age of AI disruption, something I think a lot of parents are thinking about nowadays is, when my kids are ready for college and, professional life, how are they going to go about preparing for that in the age of AI disruption? What is college education going to look like? Because the world is just changing very drastically already underneath us. And so I'm always concerned about how I can best prepare them. Is a traditional college education going to still stand in the new world? And so, how are you folks thinking about the AI disruption and how you're tailoring the curriculum, if you are at all? Thank you. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah. Usuluddin, for our current purpose, is just think of it as Aqidah studies. That's all. It's principles of Aqidah. And so it's just another term for Aqidah studies. How do you teach it? Well, there's only one way to teach it, is to go through the traditional text. There's no magic there because I don't want to innovate too much when it comes to the traditional sciences. We know how to teach those sciences, madrasas do it well. So you take a text which is readable for our students, possibly in translation, and you just go through them without getting involved in the nitty-gritty rational debates which can throw you off. So just basic aqidah, that would be usuluddin for the most part. And then you can throw in there akhlaq, moral ethics and moral philosophy of Islam. Yeah.
So the second question, we don't have too much time to get into it, but let me just say one thing, that technologies are always evolving. They're always changing. And we can't necessarily predict what the future is going to look like. But the one thing that's always going to be constant is our ability to be human and our ability to think. And these are also principles that are rooted within our tradition as well. And so one thing that we're able to do as a smaller school is we can be very flexible with our curriculum and adapt as technologies change. But what's going to always be an important foundation of everything that we do is ensuring that our students know how to be human. One of the reasons that one thing I always say is that the reason why robots will ever be able to replace us as humans is because we've become robotic ourselves. We've lost our own ability to be human. And as long as we maintain to our core what that is, what is good for humans, what is good for human flourishing, inshallah, as a civilization, we'll be on the right path. We had one more question? Yes, one more. So we're going to break for Isha now, and then we'll have dinner. We have a table that's set up over there on the side. Myself and a couple others will be there after Isha if anyone wants to ask us any other more specific questions. Jazakumullah khairan again to the WIC administration for giving us this opportunity. May Allah Ta'ala bless all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wal asr inna al-insana fi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Assalamu alaikum.